Welcome back to another video, and today we got our Week 5 college basketball Power 40 rankings, and we got a lot to talk about this week because obviously last week I had a pre-recorded one, so I have pretty much missed about 10 days of games. I haven't talked about anything from Feast Week yet, so this is going to be a very exciting, in-depth breakdown and Power 40 rankings. The movement in these rankings is just insane. I finished these rankings and I was setting it all up and wow, there's a lot of crazy movement. I mean, it's insane. So, you're in for a great video. Stay tuned. Real quick, though, before we get started, make sure you subscribe if you're new. We do college basketball every Monday, college football every Tuesday, NFL every Wednesday, and NBA every Thursday. So, if any of that interests you, make sure you get on there, subscribe, turn on the noties to make sure you don't miss whenever we post because we are posting 4 times a week here. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump on into the top 40. So starting off at number 40, it's going to be Rutgers. Moving down 14 spots now. Last time I last time I talked about them, they were undefeated. They've lost 3 of their last 4. Now some of these games were impressive losses, I guess you'd say. I mean, they lost to Alabama by 5. They lost to A&M by 4. Um, they did beat Notre Dame by 1 in their opening tournament game in the Players Era Festival, but it wasn't overtime. Notre Dame's not a very exciting team. And then they went out. This was before this tournament. They went out and lost at Kennesaw State. That's really the major thing that's dropping them. Because if they hadn't done that, they probably wouldn't drop too much with a 5-point loss against Bama and a 4-point loss against A&M. Those look good. Uh, but I am worried. I think they'll figure it out. They're a very young team. So I think they'll get better as the year goes on. So maybe it's a good thing they get these struggles out of the way. Moving on, though, to number 39, it's going to be Wake Forest dropping down a little bit. And this isn't really necessarily because Wake Forest did anything wrong. This is because, I mean, yes, they did kind of get blown out by Florida, who looks very good. But this is mostly just a lot of teams kind of came out of nowhere all of a sudden and look really good. So Wake Forest takes a little bit of a tumble, but I'm not too concerned. Florida also looks like a really good team. Number 38, I have Creighton. Now with Creighton, I am a little bit concerned. They are sitting at 5-3 right now. They got a game against Kansas this week. They went out in the Players Era Festival, got absolutely hammered by San Diego State. Keep in mind, this is after coming off a home loss to Nebraska. That's not a good look. Then they went out very close game against A&M, but they did lose, and then they won a very close game against Notre Dame in the 7th place game. I don't know. I feel like they deserve to take a little bit of a tumble. They've just looked not all that impressive. They're all the way down at 51 in KenPom. They're just they're ranked 55th in offense and 50th in defense. I mean, that is not great. So I'm going to have to drop Creighton a whole lot. You see 20 spots. I mean, you barely ever see double-digit movers up or down. There's about 10, 15 of those this week. It's crazy. Number 37, new team to the Power 40. There's quite a few new teams to the Power 40 this week. Arizona State, they're sitting at 7-1. Their only loss is an 8-point loss on the road against Gonzaga. They this past week took down New Mexico, who was ranked at some point, and St. Mary's, who's getting a lot of votes in the AP poll last week. So Arizona State, very impressive. I think they deserve a top 40 spot as of right now. UCLA is going to kind of stay put where they've been at 36. They're 6-1. They're taking care of business against these bad teams coming up. They do play Oregon on Sunday, so that should be a very interesting game. We'll see how they look there. They got a pretty tough December slate, so UCLA will be playing some tough games here coming up. We'll really get a feel for them. Xavier is going to be dropping down. Xavier got into the top 25. I really didn't see it with Xavier, and I think it goes to show they got blown out by Michigan, 25-point loss. Now they did beat Wake Forest, which is a solid win. But then they just narrowly escaped SC State. I mean, that is just you can't do that. So With Xavier, I'm a little bit lower on them still than everybody else, and I think that's fair. I mean, they're very low analytically, all the way down at 67th in KenPom, not top 70 in either offense or defense. That doesn't make me get very excited about them at all. Number 34, I have Indiana moving on 18 spots. Like I said, you've already seen three double-digit fallers. There's just crazy movement this week. Indiana falls to 5-2. They got blown out by Louisville and Gonzaga in back-to-back games in the battle for Atlantis. They did end up blowing out Providence, which is somewhat promising. But they got seventh place in the battle for Atlantis. Was not expecting that. Definitely thought they were going to be able to do better than that at least. Yeah, so I do worry about Indiana a little bit. I don't want to take too much from this. I mean, it is still very early in the season for all these teams, but they're just narrowly top 50 in offense and 70th in defense, all the way down at 53 in KenPom. So Indiana is going to have to take quite a bit of a fall, but I still think they deserve to be ranked in the Power 40. Number 33 is going to be West Virginia, moving up 8 spots. And yeah, when looking at West Virginia, they had kind of the opposite performance in the battle for Atlantis. They surprised everyone. They went out and beat Gonzaga in overtime. They did lose to Louisville in overtime, but rebounded with an overtime win against Arizona. All three of their games in the battle for Atlantis went to overtime. And they beat Gonzaga and Arizona, two teams that were ranked up to that point. Now Arizona has dropped out of the Power 40. I don't think anybody expected that this season. They just could talk about them for a second. They have 4 losses. They're 3-4. I mean, that's just ridiculous. But with West Virginia, kind of a surprise team. They also, I mean, they only have 2 losses to Louisville, who, spoiler alert, is in the Power 40. They have wins over Gonzaga and Arizona, and their only other loss is to Pitt. I don't know. West Virginia could be one of those surprise teams here. They have Tucker DeVries from Drake last year, so we'll see with them. Louisville, another unranked team coming into the Power 40. Louisville's going to be here at 32. Kind of similar thing. They're 5-2. Their only other loss outside of let's talk about the battle for Atlanta. So they went out and blew out Indiana. Then they went out and beat West Virginia, who just beat Gonzaga the day prior. And then in the championship, they lost to Oklahoma. I was ready to move Louisville into the top 25. I thought they were about to win this tournament. Oklahoma comes in, steals it from them. Their only other loss, though, is to Tennessee, who looks just dominant right now. So with Louisville, I am pretty optimistic about them moving forward. Surprising because they've been at the bottom of the barrel of Power 5 teams for the past 5-ish years. So good on them. Dayton, another one of these Feast Week risers. When looking at Dayton, they're all the way up at 26 in KenPom, 17th in offense, 51st in defense. But when looking at Dayton, they had a huge week. They're 6-2 now. They got a very close loss to both UNC and Iowa State. A 2-point loss to North Carolina, which they probably should have won. They were up like 20 points. And then a 5-point loss to Iowa State, who looks really good. But the difference here, they go out and finish their Maui Invitational with a dominant win over UConn. So you could argue Dayton should be higher. I wouldn't blame you. I mean, maybe you could argue they should be ahead of UConn. I could see that. I'm not going to go there, though, right away. Number 30, I have Arkansas moving down 11 spots. Yet again, another double-digit faller. And when looking at Arkansas, they got clobbered by Illinois. They're 5-2 now. They don't have a good win yet. I mean, they have a 5-point loss to Baylor and a 13-point loss to Illinois. So I'm still waiting for that good win. I mean, they play Miami this week on the road. I don't know if you can classify that as a good win because Miami, I mean, they were preseason Power 40, but they're 3-4 now. So with Arkansas, I'm going to be a little bit lower on them just because they don't have a great win yet. But they definitely have the talent. Oklahoma, welcome to the Power 40. They won the battle for Atlantis, so, they are all the way up at 29, and you could argue they should be a little higher. They're 7-0. They didn't have the craziest Battle for Atlanta schedule. They beat Providence by 2, Arizona by 5, and Louisville by 5, so solid wins. But they didn't have to play, Gonzaga, Indiana. But they did take down Louisville, so that was pretty impressive. So I got them up at 29. Number 28, I have Michigan. They look pretty solid actually. I'm liking what I'm seeing from them. They're 6-1 on the year. They play Wisconsin on the road tomorrow. That's gonna be a great game. But they just went out and blew out Xavier, who was ranked in the top 25. Their only loss this season is a 2-point loss on the road to Wake Forest, who I do believe is a top 40 team right now. So Michigan looking pretty solid. UConn, this is probably the biggest story from this week. They go out into the Maui Invitational and finish last place. I mean, this is just absurd. The crazy part is their schedule in the Maui Invitational, at least at that point, they played Memphis, who was unranked. They lost by 2 in overtime. Dan Hurley's technical probably lost them the game. Then they went out 1-point loss to Colorado, who I still don't even have in the Power 40, and then got absolutely blown out by Dayton in the 7th place game. So they got last in the Maui Invitational. And like I said, you could argue Dayton should be ahead of UConn. I could see it. Now, they did respond with a pretty dominant win. I mean, it was against Maryland Eastern, but they won by 54 points. With UConn, they play Baylor at home this week. I think they need to win this game. I mean, they also play at Texas. They have a tough schedule here coming up still. Baylor, Texas, Gonzaga, and Xavier, all teams in the Power 40. I think UConn should bounce back, but I don't know. I mean, the defense just looks terrible. I'm starting to get a little bit worried about UConn. I mean, Aiden Mahaney, who's supposed to be their guy, he started in the first game of the season. He's getting 5 minutes a game now. I know he's not, their guy. It's obviously Caravan, but Mahaney was supposed to be a big, transfer coming in from St. Mary's. The defense in KenPom is ranked 83rd right now. It's not looking great, so I am starting to get a little bit worried about UConn. Now, I'm not going to drop them out of the Power 40 just yet, but are they national title contenders? Probably not. I mean, maybe they could still be Big East contenders just because Creighton's looking bad, but Marquette is looking very good. So we'll see with UConn, but I have them falling 25 spots. It's got to be a record. I mean, that is just a crazy fall. Texas moving up 2 spots. They kind of had a quiet little weekend. I don't believe they played really anyone important. Let me just make sure. They took care of business. I guess they beat Syracuse, but only lost to Ohio State at this point. They're 6-1. They're doing their thing. They play UConn though this Sunday, so that should be interesting. Moving on into the top 25. You guys might not like this. I have Ohio State still ranked 25th. I'm holding on to hope. The thing is, Michi Johnson's supposed to be our huge transfer coming in from South Carolina. He's looked bad, but Ohio State as a team has looked pretty solid, at least in my opinion. I mean, they beat Texas first game of the season. Then they lost by 14 to Texas A&M, and they should have beat Pitt this weekend. They lost by 1 in overtime. That got me pretty upset. They have a chance this week to really set the tone for their season. They play at Maryland, who I had ranked in the Power 40 last week, and then home against Rutgers on Saturday. And then next week they play Auburn, so that is going to be Ohio State's got some big games coming up. I think at this point, I don't really feel the need to move them. So I'm going to keep them where they're at. And again, you may not like this. San Diego State inside the top 25 after not even being ranked last week. I did have them ranked preseason, but then when they lost to Gonzaga, I dropped them out. They go out, blow out Creighton, then they go out, lose to Oregon by 10, but then respond with an overtime win against Houston to get 3rd place in the Players Era Festival. San Diego State looked really solid. So I feel like at this point they've got to be a top 25 team. Ole Miss moving up 4 spots after losing. You don't see that very often, but they looked pretty impressive against Purdue. I was kind of doubtful with Ole Miss. They lost by 2 points. They probably should have won. They also beat BYU, who I was saying you got to watch out for that game because BYU was a Power 40 team last week for me. Um, and yeah, like I said, they probably should have won. Now they play Louisville on the road tomorrow. That should be another pretty good test for them. So Ole Miss has a chance to really move up these rankings next week. Texas A&M moving down 5 spots. I think this is fair for them. Um, they went out and lost to Oregon opening game. Then they responded with 2 solid wins against Creighton and Rutgers. But I don't know. I feel like Texas A&M might just be in this range for the majority of this season. I mean, they have solid wins. They beat Ohio State. Like I said, they just beat Creighton and Rutgers, but lost to UCF and Oregon, who aren't bad teams. I mean, Oregon is looking very good. We'll talk about them soon. But this week they play home against Wake Forest, who's a Power 40 team. And then I don't know if this is a neutral site. I think it might be. But they play Texas Tech on Sunday, who was Power 40, a Power 40 team for me for this whole season. They did just drop out this week. So 2 pretty tough games here this week. UNC moving down 13 spots after going out and barely beating Dayton. They probably should have lost that game. They got pretty much handled by Auburn. They lost by 13 and then lost by 3 to Michigan State. So UNC could have had 3 losses in the Maui Invitational. Now that was unfortunately for UConn's case. That was the Huskies that did that. But UNC was right there to do that, and they have 3 losses on the season already, and they have a chance to get a 4th. They play Alabama this week. That's going to be a very tough win for them. And I actually do worry about UNC just because the big man play just looks bad. I mean, it looks bad. So UNC is going to have a lot to figure out coming up, and really not a lot of time to do that because, like I said, they play Alabama this week. I think UNC is going to have to really lean into RJ Davis and just play fast because, I mean, the defense doesn't look great. I mean, like I said, they just don't have a big man. So UNC, I'm starting to sound the panic alarms on them a little bit. But again, it is early in the season, and that could all be taken back if they beat Alabama this week, which there's a good chance they do. They get it at home. Number 20, I am going to have Michigan State. They did beat UNC, so I felt like I had to put them ahead. They're 6-2. They're solid. Their only losses are to Kansas and Memphis. We'll talk about Memphis soon also. But in the Maui Invitational, they got 3rd place. They beat Colorado first game, lost to Memphis, but then responded with an overtime win against UNC. So I think Michigan State, at this point, deserves here to be. I feel like Michigan State needs a guy, though. They're kind of doing this by committee. Maybe somebody steps up it here. But with Michigan State, I feel like they really need their 1A go get a bucket type guy. That's the only concern I have about them, though. They've looked pretty solid. Houston, that should not say moving down 5. They moved down a whole lot more than 5. Let me see exactly where they did move down for you because with Houston, I know they were probably top 10 at least. They went out, lost to Alabama, then responded with a win against Notre Dame, but then lost to San Diego State. So they took 2 losses this past week. Now they're sitting with 3 losses. One of these, very elite teams, at least we thought going into the season, already with 3 early losses. Let me get the exact where they were exactly last week. I'm trying to find it if it will load. They were at 7, so they're actually moving down 12 spots. So yet another double-digit faller / riser. But yeah, not UConn. Houston. I mean, it's kind of the same thing with Michigan State. A little bit less concerned for them. But they don't really have a guy. I mean, they have LJ Cryer, Emmanuel Sharp, but losing Jamal Shed, a guy like that, it's just a tough blow. They're still ranked 5th in KenPom, so that I guess is promising. but I don't know. I, I gotta drop Houston down quite a bit. They have 3 losses. Number 18, I'm gonna have Pitt. They're all the way up at 13th in KenPom, 13th in offense, 29th in defense. They look very good. They, like I said, went on the road to Ohio State and took them down, which I value as a very good win. And they also have a dominant win over West Virginia and LSU, uh, two teams that were either ranked right now or ranked at some point. And their only loss is a 6-point loss to Wisconsin, who looks elite right now. Pitt's looking very solid. I like what I'm seeing from them. They have a chance to get another win on the road against Mississippi State, who was ranked last week, and they were very close to being ranked again this week. Number 17, I have Illinois. They move up 6 spots after dominating Arkansas and looking very good in doing so. Their only loss is a 13-point loss to Alabama. With Illinois, they're going to have a chance next week. They get 2 very important games. They have home against Wisconsin and home against Tennessee. That is next week, though. So they're going to have a chance to really skyrocket up these rankings. I'm liking what I'm seeing from them, though. Number 16, I have Cincinnati. They're just dominating all these subpar teams. But when you have a bad schedule like this, all you really can do is dominate them. And their closest game this season, I believe, has been 16 points. So they look very good. They're at 9th in KenPom right now, 25th in offense, 5th in defense. They look very solid. So I'm going to continue to have to keep bumping them up. I mean, KenPom's loving them, the numbers, but I do kind of want to see them play someone, and they do later in the month. They play Xavier. They play on the road against Dayton. This week they play on the road against Villanova, so I guess we'll see how they look there. Number 15, I have Memphis. I said UConn moving down 25 spots has got to be a record. I guess this is the record. 26 spots up for Memphis. I mean, just a ridiculous weekend. They go out and beat UConn. Then they go out and beat Michigan State. And you can see how high I am on the Spartans. They did lose in the championship to Auburn, but I didn't expect them to win that game. But with Memphis, they're 6-1. Only losses to Auburn with wins over MSU and UConn. You got to give them some credit. I mean, I'm not sure where they're at in KenPom. See if I can find them. They're at 31 in KenPom, but I feel like Memphis, just with the wins they picked up this past week, they deserve to be at this spot. I mean, nobody expected them to, first of all, beat UConn. Nonetheless, make the championship game. So yeah, Memphis, very impressive week. Arguably one of the most impressive weeks. Kind of a shocker just coming out of nowhere. Penny Hardaway may have just saved his job. And they got some sneaky tough games here in December. They play Clemson on the road. They play Virginia on the road. They play Mississippi State. They play Ole Miss. All those teams are solid teams. So Memphis looking very strong right now. We'll see if they can keep it up. Number 14, I have Florida. Speaking of looking very strong right now, Florida is one of those teams. They are just cruising at 8-0 right now. They dominated Wake Forest. That was really the only tough team they've played so far, though. But this week they play Virginia. They play Arizona State, who I had in the top 40. Next week they play UNC. So they're going to start to play some of these teams. And Florida's at 8 in KenPom right now. So they're kind of similar to Cincinnati. The difference is that Florida, along with dominating, their lackluster opponents they played on their pretty easy schedule, they've also dominated Wake Forest, who I've in the top 40. So I think I'll give Florida the edge right now. And with the talent they have on their team, Florida's looking to be very dangerous. Number 13, I have Baylor. With Baylor, they have some losses. They also have some solid wins, though. I mean, I don't know. They're kind of a confusing team. I haven't figured them out quite yet. I mean, they got blown out by Tennessee. They got blown out by Gonzaga, but they beat Arkansas. They beat St. John's, who doesn't look as good. I don't know. Maybe I have Baylor a little too high, but I don't know. I feel like this is a fair spot. They play UConn on the road, so I'm really going to watch that game because I need to see both those two teams play, who are looking a little bit shaky to start off. Um, Number 12, I have Alabama moving down 7. When looking at Bama, I don't know. They have probably the hardest schedule in the country. I mean, they this past week alone, they beat Illinois, and then they go out in the Players Era Festival, beat Houston in overtime, and I'm like, all right, let's move up. Then they go Rutgers, then they go and beat Rutgers by 5 as well, and I'm like, all right, Alabama, locked and loaded, maybe top 3 team. Then they lose to Oregon in the championship game, which I will say Oregon's looking very impressive. If Alabama goes out and on the road and beats UNC this week, and they also play Creighton, if they win those 2 games, it's going to be very hard to say Alabama's not a top 8, 7, 6 team. I mean, they're looking very solid. I know I have them kind of low, but they did take a little bit of losses. They're ranked 10th in KenPom right now. I still worry about this defense, but as of right now, I have to keep them here because the team that just beat them, I have to put ahead of them. Oregon moving up 24 spots. I mean, just a ridiculous week. Them and Memphis have got to be, uh, well, they are the biggest climbers, but they had the 2 best weekends. Oregon went out, beat Texas A&M. You can see where I have them, 22nd. They beat San Diego State, who I have ranked at 24. Keep in mind, these are both 10-point wins. It's not like they won at the buzzer. They were in control. And then they go out and beat Alabama. They were also leading that game for a majority of it. They pick up 3 top 25 wins in the span of 3 days. In the span of 5 days. But I mean, that is very impressive stuff from Oregon. They also play UCLA on Sunday, so they have a chance to get another Power 40 win. Oregon is cruising right now. If you don't have them in your top 15 at least, I don't know what you're doing. Let's see where they are in KenPom. They're ranked 19th in KenPom. So even KenPom, who, it keeps in mind preseason where you were ranked. Oregon was nowhere near the top 25 preseason. They're already inside the top 20 in KenPom. So that looks to be very impressive. Oregon doing their thing there. Number 10, I have Gonzaga. Now, they started off the season hot, opening night, blow out Baylor by 40 points. Since then, though, I mean, they were cruising for a while. They beat Arizona State, who I have as a Power 40 team. They beat San Diego State on the road, who I has as a top 25 team. Then this weekend, they go out and lose to West Virginia, which they're not going to win every game. It wasn't overtime. They responded, though. They blew out Indiana, and then they blew out Davidson. Got 5th place in the battle for Atlantis. This week they play Kentucky. That's going to be a great top 10 matchup. Next week they play UConn as well. Gonzaga is going to have a great chance to get back into the top 25. Get back into the top 5, so I wouldn't worry too much here. Number 9 of Wisconsin. They're one of the few undefeated teams left. And it's not like they haven't played anyone. They've played Arizona. They've played Pitt. They've played UCF. So these are all solid teams. The Pitt win looked very good. They won by 6 points. They were leading for most of that game as well. Tomorrow they play Michigan, which I have as a Power 40 team. And later in the week, they go on the road to Marquette, another top 10 matchup. And then the next week, they play Illinois on the road. So Wisconsin, if they win those 3 games, Wisconsin may be a top 3 team in the country. Ridiculous stuff because I don't think I had them finishing top 10 in the Big Ten. Just goes to show what I know and how crazy college basketball can be sometimes, which, I mean, I'll say I love it. Number 8, I have Purdue moving up 5 spots. A lot of these teams jumping into the top 10 kind of just jumped in because a lot of teams fell out. I mean, you had UConn falling, UNC. Who else was in there last week? UConn, UNC. I just had Houston. I think there was another one. Maybe not. But with all that being said, Purdue's going to be back into the top 10. They went out beat Ole Miss, pretty solid win there. They also beat NC State, so Purdue I'll have here an 8. Only lost to Marquette. Number 7, I have Duke. Duke does have 2 losses, and they're moving up. Just because with Duke, I mean, the defense looks amazing for them. I mean, the fact that it looks this good and their team is that young. They went on the road to Arizona and beat them. They lost by 3 to Kansas. I don't, their only losses are 5-point loss to Kentucky, 3-point loss to Kansas. 2 teams that I have very high in the rankings. I mean, you haven't seen either of them yet. They have a chance to pick up a huge win this week, home against Auburn. They also go on the road against Louisville later in the week. So, 2 very solid, opportunities to win. Obviously, if they beat Auburn, there's a lot of teams that play great games. I mean, this is another stacked week for college basketball. It's great to see that early in the season. There's that many, prime time matchups. So with Duke, I know they have 2 losses. I'm not worried at all. I'm honestly feeling better about them now than I maybe was going into the season, which is crazy. Kentucky at 6. They're 7-0, one of the few undefeateds left. They have a win over Duke, so I'm going to keep them ahead of Duke. Besides that, they really haven't played anyone, but tomorrow they play on the road against Clemson, and then later in the week they play Gonzaga, which is also essentially a road game. So with Kentucky, another one of these teams who has huge opportunities this week to either fall or climb up even more. Number 5, I have Marquette moving up 7 spots. With Marquette, you could argue they should be higher. I'm going to keep them at 5. The 8 people has them at 5. That's not my reasoning, but with Marquette, again, one of the few undefeateds left. They have a win over Maryland, who looks pretty solid. Maryland's 7-1 also, by the way. They have a dominant win over Purdue. They have a win over Georgia, who was just narrowly outside the Power 40. This week they play Iowa State and Wisconsin. So, I mean, if they split that'll be impressive. If they manage to win both those games, Marquette is an animal. Cam Jones looks phenomenal. He's averaging 20 points a game, 6 assists, and 5 rebounds. He looks great. David Joplin looks really good. This Marquette team in general looks amazing. Number 4, I have Tennessee, also moving up 7 spots. You could argue Marquette should be ahead. I don't know. I had Tennessee ahead last week. I didn't feel the need to jump them over. Tennessee has a win over Virginia, a win over Baylor, a win over Louisville. Keep in mind, all those games were dominant. 22-point win over Louisville, 22-point win over Virginia, 15-point win over Baylor. This week they play Syracuse, so not, anything crazy. But they keep on winning, so I'm going to keep on moving them up. Number 3, I have Iowa State moving up 3, and they also lost, I believe. But again, kind of similar with the Duke thing, I feel very good about this Iowa State team. They probably should have beat Auburn. They were winning by a whole lot of points. They lost by 2. Auburn came back, but they responded. They beat Dayton. They beat Colorado. Dayton looks very solid as well. Going into the season, I thought it was Tamin Lipsey's team, and it kind of still is, but Keyshawn Gilbert is averaging 16.5 points a game. A lot of people are stepping up for Iowa State. Tamin Lipsey's only averaging 11 points a game. The fact that they're playing this good without Tamin Lipsey, needing to do this much, I think just goes to show how dominant this team is. Like I said, they play Marquette. They get it at home. Iowa State's going to have a real chance to pick up another huge win. And yeah, the fact that they probably should have beat Auburn, only lost by 2. They're the only team who has really tested Auburn so far. When looking at Auburn, they're moving up 1 spot. You could argue they should be 1. They probably have the best resume in the country. They have a win over Houston. They have a win over Iowa State, a win over UNC, a win over Memphis. Those are all top 25 teams. Iowa State I've ranked at 3. Memphis, they have a chance to go into Cameron Indoor and beat Duke as well. It's going to be pretty hard for me not to put them at number 1 next week if they go out and beat Duke. I'll say it right now. If they go out and beat Duke on the road, I think I will bump them up to number 1. The team I will have at number 1, though, is going to be Kansas. I'll keep them where they're at. They're 7-0. They haven't lost. They have a 3-point win over UNC, an 8-point win over Michigan State, a 3-point win over Duke. I mean, they have a good resume as well. They also go on the road against Creighton, so they're going to have a chance to pick up another pretty good win. I mean, you could. I mean, Kansas and Auburn are 1A and 1B. Johni Broome looks like the best player in the country for Auburn. With Kansas, I think it goes to show that the fact that they beat Duke, first of all, they were like 5-point underdogs on a neutral site. That was kind of weird to see. Hunter Dickinson gets ejected with 10 minutes left. They go out, handle, you know, they didn't handle Duke, but they go out after losing their best player and continue to play, look very good without him. Pretty impressive stuff because last year the depth was the huge issue for me. I just couldn't get around to Kansas. I picked them to lose in the first round. They lost in the second round in March Madness. But yeah, I mean, KJ Adams, DeJuan Harris, I mean, Hunter Dickinson, Zeke Mayo, they brought in AJ Story. I mean, the depth is just everywhere for this Kansas team. That's arguably their strong suit. I mean, I think it would be their strong suit this year, again, which is crazy because last year that was their weak point. So Kansas, I will keep it number one, but like I said, I mean, them and Auburn are pretty much 1A, 1B. But that is going to do it for the Week 5 Power 40 College Basketball Rankings. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you did, make sure you go on there, leave a like, subscribe if you're new, turn on the noties to make sure you don't miss. We're uploading 4 times a week. College basketball every Monday, college football every Tuesday, NFL every Wednesday, and NBA every Thursday. With all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure you check out the 2 most recent videos popping up right now. Links in the description, as always, X, Twitch, TikTok, Discord. Make sure you follow those, join those if you'd like. But with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed. See you guys tomorrow with our college football top 25 rankings.